Yeah, there were so many amazing insights that came with the Enlightenment, and the way that those ideas were deployed, primarily in the American situation, but also through the French Revolution and other developments. But we came up with this system of government that had some extraordinary concepts that had never really been tried out on a grand scale before. One was this idea that the people were in charge of themselves, that they had a right to overthrow their governments if the government was not acting legitimately, like, and even putting that on paper, right?
Mhm.
Um, the way we crafted our understanding of speech, and this is why speech is such a big topic now, is because there is such a profound difference in how we look at speech and how everybody else looks at it. What's so strange about a lot of the sort of modern thinking is that, yeah, why throw out the baby with the bathwater? Yes, let's improve things. Let's make life, let's make it so that there's more opportunity, that there's less inequality, all these things. You can achieve those things without getting rid of freedom of speech or due process or any of those things. So we have to stand up for the fact that we made something incredible. And well, maybe not we, but they made something incredible. We're the
Yeah.
inheritors of it. We're the stewards of it. And I personally would feel, great shame if it were to vanish on our watch, right? Like that would be a failure, such a failure of our generation. And I hope that's not the case.
Welcome to Thoughtful Money. I'm its founder and your host, Adam Taggart. Today we're going to start with our usual financial fare, but then branch out into other important topics impacting society today, like the state of free speech, media bias, and the role of government. I'm taking the license to do so because of our good fortune to be joined today by Matt Taibbi, one of the few remaining truly great independent journalists, a rare breed these days. Many of you know Matt from his work at Rolling Stone, where among other great scoops, he chronicled the unfolding of the global financial crisis, as well as the abuses that caused it, in a plain language manner that the general public could finally understand. Or you may know him from his pioneering work on the Twitter files, exposing the government-driven censorship and narrative planting that had metastasized across the social media ecosystem during the COVID era. Or you may know him from his ongoing work on Substack at his Racket news channel, or from the many books he's authored. We're very lucky to have him join us today. Matt, it's wonderful to see you.
Thanks for having me, Adam. Wow, that's a very kind introduction.
Well, I appreciate that, but it's just all facts. So, anyways, kudos to you for a very illustrious career. So, I want to start by asking you kind of about the financial side of things, which I don't know, Matt. I'm not sure that's the majority of your coverage anymore. I think you're more on, freedom and media bias and, role of government and all that stuff. But if you don't mind, I'd like to kind of start with your perspective as one of the great chroniclers of the global financial crisis.
Hmm.
Um, so the question I have for you is based on, what you're seeing now, if you're still looking at the financial system at all from your perch, did we learn anything constructive from the excesses and abuses that led to the GFC? Has the integrity of our financial system improved or worsened since?
I don't think we learned anything terribly constructive. I, there was maybe a little bit of specific learning in terms of specifically home mortgages, maybe.
Hmm.
But you can still see the same kind of bubble-like activity going on. There's, there are a range of new financial products that, uh, sort of simulate a lot of the same problems that we had with mortgages. Um, and I see a lot of similarities in what's going on with AI,
Hmm.
an investment in that area to sort of similar manias that we've had. And I don't want to call it a mania because obviously the technology is really important and it's exciting and all that.
Right. But so was the internet, and that was a mania.
Exactly. And you see a lot of the same issues with it's a great idea, but monetizing it, that's not there yet. The business plan has a back of the napkin kind of feel to it in some cases. Um, so yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't cover it as regularly as I used to, or really much at all in the last year or so, but I do hear people expressing a lot of the same worries, but about sort of overinvestment and the possibility of an investment bubble collapsing.
All right. So feel free to pass on this if you're just not close enough to the pulse anymore. But in terms of kind of the casino aspect of Wall Street, where kind of no matter what happens, the banks always win, and even when they don't, they get bailed out either directly or through the back door. Do you have a sense whether that has improved at all, about as bad, or gotten worse?
I think it's gotten worse. I mean, the only thing that's better is that it's more democratized, right? So you see more ordinary people getting involved in the market, and trying to beat the hedge funds at their own game, and a lot of people have become uh, decided to trust themselves and not give over their savings to investment professionals, and so they're doing a lot of the same activities that we used to see from big banks on Wall Street. But there's still a very casino-like feel to all of it. There's a lot of day
Hmm.
trading and short-term thinking, narrow horizon thinking, and that's very worrisome. Plus, there's the overall problem of just this enormous flood of money that came, after the COVID rescue,
Hmm.
and that all hasn't been taken out of the economy yet, and so there's a sense of unreality about the market that I do worry about.
Okay. And I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it sounds like what you're saying is we didn't really learn any real constructive lessons from the GFC. We're kind of just continuing the same game.
I don't think we did. I mean, my big insight into that is how it was covering Dodd-Frank and what happened after that. And there was an opportunity to do some really simple things about y- you know uh, making the markets for certain kinds of financial instruments more transparent,
Hmm.
similar to what was done after the crash in 29. And they consciously decided not to do that and to make a much more complicated, um, uh, you know, sort of bureaucratic response. And I don't think they adjusted anything fundamentally after that crash.
Okay. All right. So that's the financial system side of things. Now, on the economy side of things, I got a couple questions around this, and we're going to get to what you talked about when I saw you last in New Orleans. But the West appears to be sort of increasingly flirting with socialism right now. In your mind, what's driving that?
Well, it's the same thing that drove the rise of populism on the right in 2016. It's the same thing that drove the Bernie Sanders campaign.
So the K-shaped economy, the bottom majority beginning to
Yeah,
fall further behind.
and you hear the stories repeatedly. I mean, we started hearing it in campaign coverage as early as the Obama-McCain campaign, where actually even earlier than that, right? There were a lot of people who were moving to figures like Ron Paul really early, who were just incredibly frustrated with the performance of um, sort of modern American capitalism. Uh, so we did see in Iowa, like I remember having this amazing conversation with somebody in Iowa in 2016 who had been a lifelong Democrat, um, but had to sell the family farm and went to had been forced to go work in the local Walmart, and had seen this progression of an economy that was based around family farms and now was based around these multinational companies. But
Hmm.
this person was voting for Donald Trump, and he said essentially, you know what? I work for Walmart now, and when the boss says something is going to happen, it happens. And I've gotten disenchanted with all of these politicians who come through here and promise things and they don't happen. And so
Mhm.
that's why I think we saw a lot of people go to a business person who wasn't a politician um, for that reason. Now, it's been almost 3 terms since then, and or it's 2.5 terms, and a lot of the same problems are there. And there's this enormous frustration about, especially people who are who are well educated, in their 20s and thinking about their future, and they don't even see the possibility, for instance, of ever putting money down for a home or
Mhm.
having kids or anything like that. And because I think, among other things, because those people are very significantly overrepresented in media, there's there's a panic about the dysfunctionality of this economy that there isn't on the conservative side, and um, that's hollowing out the support for the old school Democratic Party and moving, in particular, younger support people who used to be Democrats more in the left direction, right? More in the
Right.
direction of a Mamdani or the DSA. Remember, Bernie used to be a DSA leader, but he was, politically more like an Eisenhower Republican if you actually looked at his platform. But he's had to move along with the growing dissatisfaction within his own caucus. So I think that's where it's coming from. It's young people who just don't see a future.
Okay. So, by the way, I talk a lot about this on this channel, so none of this
Oh,
is new to the
I'm
viewers here.
sorry. Yeah.
No, no, it's perfect. You're adding a lot of good validation. So, behavioral economist Peter Atwater, who he didn't coin the term K-shaped recovery, but he's kind of the one that elevated it. Um, he has a lot of great sayings, but one of them is desperate people act desperately. Or, when you've been out standing out in the cold rain long enough, you'll get in the car with anybody, right? And is that where we're getting to with the younger echelons of society here that are looking at the path they're being asked to step into to pursue the American dream, and they're just doing the math and saying, you know what, this just looks like perpetual disappointment and servitude to me. Like this, I need something different than what I'm being told to do because it just isn't working for me.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to that. There's a lot of but some of it though is cultural and educational too, right? I
Hmm.
think people in my generation, um, yeah, even though I think a lot of people who went to ordinary 4-year liberal arts colleges in the 80s and 90s and came out and found a very disappointing job market, became disillusioned at that time. There was still culturally this idea that, well, that's okay. You just got to, dig deeper and
Get
find
it.
something, right? Like,
Buckle down and hustle. Yep.
yeah, exactly. Like that was still very much part of an ethos in this country. There wasn't an expectation that something was just going to be given to you. Now I think it's a combination of a hollowing out of our education system, a lack of belief in kind of some of the organizing myths about American society.
Hmm.
Uh, you hear a lot of people talking about how the pursuit of happiness is this canard, right? That was created by, privileged white guys, and society is structured unfairly, and so that we need to correct for that. Uh, that's coming also, with a commensurate lack of education about, some of the things that I saw as a student in the Soviet Union a million years ago. People just don't know the history of what some of these other solutions have led to, or these other proposed solutions. So, yeah, it sounds great to them, and you can tell that it's real because uh, one of the things that you see a lot in media right now is not so much, it's unfair that I'm not making as much as my next door neighbor. It's
Hmm.
the idea that there shouldn't be people who make as much as Elon Musk or Bill Gates, like that they just shouldn't exist, right?
Right.
And that's an ideological thing that comes from somewhere that surely doesn't have anything to do with their personal experience, right? It's an idea that they're gnawing at as they're going through a hard time in their lives, and that's new. Like we used to, part of it is because the rich people really are much richer than they used to be, but there's also this new idea that the economy is fundamentally structured unfairly.
Mhm. So it's kind of a perfect storm where yes, the wealth gap is larger and continuing to widen. So just at a foundational level, their concerns are valid. But as you said, we've sort of hollowed out the education system, as you talked about. I'm sure we could talk for a whole hour on that. We have, I'm sure you're familiar with the work of Jonathan Haidt
Hmm. Oh yeah.
and his colleague on the coddling of the American mind.
Mhm.
Um,
Lukyanov, yep.
yeah. I actually interviewed Greg Lukianoff and about this, and it was one of my most favorite interviews I've ever done. So, we have kind of told new generations growing up, I mean, honestly, a different sort of foundational story of what it means to be an American or a Westerner than previous generations had before. Then we also have kind of the toxic cancer of social media in here that is constantly pushing everybody else's relative, perfect life in front of your face, where you're
Oh, well,
feeling
yeah.
like, yeah,
That's another huge factor. Yeah, absolutely.
yeah. So, okay, so we have this toxic soup, I guess, that's swirling here that is making people think. And I don't know, you may have, I'm sure you have a more informed opinion of this than me. I don't know if they are falling in love with socialism, that it's more that they have fallen out of love with capitalism. And it's almost a fatalistic of like, all right, look, I feel like I'm getting screwed by the current system. You're telling me socialism is bad and it's going to screw me, but at least this guy's promising me some free stuff along the way. So if I'm going to get screwed either way, let me vote for the guy who's going to give me some free stuff.
Yeah, I think there's something to that. I think it's also a metaphysical problem, though, that um, there are a lot of people who just don't even know how to define happiness or how to understand what that might look like in their lives. I mean,
Hmm.
when I was growing up, the idea that happiness somehow correlated to having a lot of money was totally alien. Like I never thought that was the case. Um, uh, when I was very young, I traveled when I think I was 21 years old when I moved to Uzbekistan. I was trying to be a reporter there. Now, I was living off a couple of $100 a month, which was enough there. But I met people who were sort of newly freed after the Soviet Union's collapse. And they would tell me things like, you know what, if I could just have a hot dog stand somewhere in the United States and
Hmm.
make just enough money to come home and have a family and yeah, that's like a dream life to me. And that's how we understood the American dream once upon a time was you get your little piece of something, you got a family, and you get to fall in love and travel and do these things.
And coach Little League and, be a part of your community through the Rotary Club or whatever. Yeah,
Right.
I
You have your and you have your own private religious or belief system
right.
and that's what's important to you. But it's we've I'm sorry to interrupt. It's just that I
No.
think it's such a big thing that we've become you know a society that measures everything in these material terms uh, and doesn't understand that it has no frame of reference for a non-material way of looking at things. That's what I worry about with young kids.
Well, I'm so glad you're elevating that because this channel, Thoughtful Money, is a wealth building channel. So obviously we talk an awful lot about money. All right, talk about the markets, talk about the economy, talk about money. But I really do my best every couple of videos to try to bring it back and ground to people that money is just a means to an end. It's not true wealth in and of itself. And the research is pretty clear. It's a lot of the things you just mentioned. It's it's social connection, like meaningful social or quality social connection, having purpose in your life, and having good health. And if
Mm.
you really focus on those things, that really is the recipe for a great life. And in fact, the video on this channel after this one that's going to release is about meaning. Is a book that just came out on the New York Times bestseller list. It's all about meaning, and I talked with the author
Oh,
about that.
oh,
So
wow.
I very much agree with you. But it's interesting. So we're going to get to your time in the USSR in just a second. Were you already there when the movie Wall Street came out? With Gordon Gekko and Greed is Good.
I was, yeah. Yeah.
Okay, because I think that was really a seminal shift in the American psyche, right? And then after that, we just built on it, right? The Paris Hilton, the Kardashians, just all that stuff that really began lauding and worshiping material excess, right? And then, of course, social media only added fuel to that fire.
Actually, Adam, could I ask you a question? Have you met people who don't know that Gordon Gekko was supposed to be the villain in that movie?
It's a great question.
I
Yeah, a
have.
lot of a lot of
I've met
people see him as the protagonist. Yeah,
Yeah, a lot of people see when he gives the speech to Teldar Paper, and he talks about how greed clarifies, greed works, right? And it's this weird from one angle, it does sound a little bit like it's supposed to be a kind of clarion call for how America operates, but it's also speaks to his sort of moral bankruptcy. And there's a whole generation of people on Wall Street who didn't see it that way, right? Who grew up
right.
uh,
Idolizing him.
idolizing him, yeah. I don't think it leads to a good place. But anyway, I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, no, no. It's going exactly where I wanted to go. So, okay, so when I saw you in person last, we were at the New Orleans Investment Conference a few months ago, and I was very impressed with your talk there. But I was very impressed with the fact that it wasn't the talk you planned to give. So, it turned out that the New York City mayoral election was the night before your speech, and as you stood up on stage, you said, "Hey, look, it just really got me thinking about a lot of my experiences when I spent time, several years in the USSR." And I kind of had to throw my old speech in the garbage because I want to just talk to you all about the dangers of socialism. To your point earlier, not only do I think we're not teaching Americans kind of the foundational aspects of what Western society and capitalism that made Western society great, but I think we're also not teaching them about the failures of some of these other forms of government and how, folks like you and I know, pretty much everywhere they've been tried, they have failed or they've resulted in extremely oppressive regimes. Um, can you just talk for a little bit about the dangers of turning away from capitalism like this? Because I don't get the sense that you feel like, oh, well, this is just kids being kids and they're just going to go have their rebellious years, flirting with socialism for a couple years. I think you're more concerned that this could put us on a path that might be really hard for us to get out of.
Yeah, I mean, the first time I started to worry about this was when Trump got elected, and I remember going to some protest rallies after his election, and I started to see a lot of kids in crowns waving hammer and sickle emblems, and I would go up and talk to these kids and
Were
say,
they
well,
pro-Trump or were they protesting?
no, they were protesting Trump.
Okay.
Yeah, and I would ask them, well, what do you know about Soviet history? Like, why are you waving that flag? Like, did
Mhm.
you do you know, do you know of any, And I started asking about certain things, the camps, the gulags, that sort of thing. And it's a blank, right? Like there's a version of history that's now being taught where uh, socialism has never been tried, right? You see that all over the place. Uh,
Hmm.
it's uh, essentially what a lot of young people believe is that the Russian Revolution took place, but it was hijacked by the dictator Stalin, who turned it into this authoritarian thing, and that's completely not what happened. It was already well on the way. And in fact, there had already been all sorts of massacres and mass imprisonment and all this. I actually went to a school in Leningrad when it was still Leningrad, where there was the textbook that was still being used in 1989 that was teaching what happened in a little place called Kronstadt in St. Petersburg. This was before Stalin took over. This is while Trotsky was still the major player during the Civil War period. There was a group of revolutionaries. They were hardcore Bolsheviks. They were supporters of the revolution. They were sailors who were stationed at a station place in St. Petersburg, but they weren't getting free speech, and their election results were not being validated by the party. So they rebelled, and Trotsky just had them all murdered. And I actually had a textbook. I remember reading it that described those sailors as uh, spies for the whites, which is, that was the czarist side of the Civil War. And wreckers, right? They were nothing of the sort, right? So this is the same kind of propaganda that we're now getting in the United States, which is that uh, you know everything was hunky dory until Stalin took
Hmm.
over, and that wasn't the case. I can't, as you heard in my speech, like I saw so many horrible, awful things and heard so many firsthand accounts from people who lived in the Soviet Union. I was in the basement in a village of a town hall not far from where Boris Yeltsin grew up, where you could still see the bullet holes from where the local kulaks were executed. Yeah, I mean, there's a million stories I could tell, but the problem is all the things that we grew up reading, like the Gulag Archipelago, the Colima Tales, the Robert Conquest book about the Great Terror, that they're just not teaching that stuff to kids anymore, so they don't know. And that's just Russia, right? That doesn't even include the Maoist issues, the Ankar rebellion, right, in Cambodia. I mean, there's so many awful stories, and they just don't know them.
So, it's sort of an unfair question, but so obviously it makes you very concerned about the future direction of the country, of society. Do you do you have faith that we can start teaching, clarifying people's understanding and all this, and we'll do it through debate and whatever, reform the education system, all that stuff? Or with the cycle of history, does the pendulum just need to swing so that we adopt these policies and they fail spectacularly and then we pick things up from the rubble?
I mean, I hope it's the former, but I'm very much worried that it's the latter. One of the things that makes me worry is that you see on social media that the same kind of style of politics that gripped the Soviet Union in the 20s and 30s, which was this, it was sort of like the Salem witch hunts over and over and over again, right?
Hmm.
It became embedded in the way people thought about everything, so much so that it was still a feature that you could see in the personalities of people 60 and 70 years later. They were still reflexively protesting, their orthodoxy all the time. Like that was the way people made conversation, was to show that they didn't have secret inner, forbidden thoughts. And you see that on social media now. People are constantly like, whether it's the little flags they put on as emojis
Hmm.
this is a visual representation of my orthodoxy. I am not a bad thinker, right? This is
Right.
all the stuff.
And if you don't share it, you're the bad guy.
Exactly, exactly. And this is something that is a feature of this kind of repressive society. Orwell wrote about it. All of the Russians wrote about it. Solzhenitsyn, obviously, Shalamov, Vinovich. You can find it, and it's very much now part of our mode of political being, and that's what I really worry about. No, cancel culture is like it's a kindergarten version of it, right? It's not the same thing where you're marching people off and putting a bullet in the back of their heads, but there is like this coldness and this moral absence that goes with it that really does worry me, and I don't know how to get people out of it except through education. Uh, I'd be curious to know what your thoughts are.
Well, it's a great question. I actually just got fairly embroiled in the tar pit on X yesterday,
Oh,
uh,
really?
talking about some of this stuff. But look, you're the king of getting embroiled in those things and yet still keeping your head above them, which is amazing. Let me so cancel culture. Let's add wokeism. Let's add DEI. Um, do you see those? You sort of said kindergarten. Do you see those as sort of stepping stones towards a more socialist slash communist spectrum, on the way to getting to where you're worried about? Like, are those the kind of stations we'd expect to see heading in that direction?
I think so because one of the features of um, uh, the disaster that we see in places like the Soviet Union is uh, you see a profession of high ideals on the one side, and then in pursuit of that, you'll see an increasing tolerance to throw away civil liberties, right?
Hmm.
So as people become more and more anxious to reach the social goal, they'll become less and less interested in whether or not, somebody's innocent of something or whether or not the person has gone through due process. And actually, we see this on both the left and the right now. Um, it's this willingness to assume somebody's guilty of something and just go forward. That's very much a feature of like wokeism and cancel culture is, yeah, we have a real problem with, let's say, sexual harassment in Hollywood. So let's do a whispering campaign where there are no standards of evidence and we just sort of put people's names out as
Right.
users. And that's going to, the overall, it's going to be a net plus. But you can't make an omelet without breaking a few eggs. And
Yeah. If there's some collateral damage along the way, it sucks to be those guys, but yeah, end
right,
justifies the means. Yeah.
right. And you see that people sort of expressing that all the time, which is so weird because, I grew up kind of more on the left side. I was a very much a liberal, Massachusetts liberal,
Yeah.
but at the same time, that was at a time when you could believe in, say, more social programming for people, or governmental solutions that could help out the poor and do all these other things without sacrificing free speech, due process, all these other things that are really important. And that's what I worry about is suddenly the Bill of Rights is just not important to people. And where that comes from, I'm not sure.
Yeah. And that was really what I took from your speech in New Orleans was your multiple observations that as people began, even though it's sold as everybody's equal, right? The power concentrates in the decision makers, and everyone's trying to get closer to the power center. Uh, but the power center is increasingly concentrating and pushing more and more people out. So as they get more and more desperate, they're willing to essentially throw their neighbors under the bus to be able to try to get close, still stay close to the warmth of the sun. Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's funny that you use that metaphor like that. There was the great movie about, I think it's the only uh, Russian Oscar winner was Burnt by the Sun. That was
Huh.
the great movie from the 90s about what happened during the Soviet period. It was exactly the same metaphor. There was a director named Mikhalkov who did it. But yeah, absolutely, that's what's going on is people become anxious. And the really frustrating thing is that there's like a basic lesson about all this stuff that used to come instinctively to people who were, sort of social liberals on the left. Ira Glasser, who was the great ACLU lawyer, the guy who he was the person who oversaw the representation of the marchers of the Nazi marchers in Skokie, right? So he was the great speech champion. His point was that if you allow the government to if you allow somebody to say the Nazis can't march in Skokie, Illinois, you're putting somebody in charge of it, right? And
Hmm.
and who do you think that somebody's going to be? It's not going to be you ultimately, right? And this is the thing that I think is being forgotten in all this anxiety to make sure that certain kinds of things are suppressed is that you're creating a mechanism and somebody's going to be in charge of it, and it's almost certainly not going to be you in in the end. And that's what I worry about is that people are so anxious to get rid of the bad thing that they forget about the mechanics of it.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the great things about Western society is humans are still using wetware 1.0 from the caveman days, right? And so Western society, particularly the Constitution and America's form of government has been one of the most successful ways to kind of separate us from our baser nature. And we see that times we lapse, right? Salem witch trials, the McCarthyism era, right? So we can slip back into that, you know, that tribal, the tribal shortcomings, right?
Mm.
I saw you in again at New Orleans. I think it was 3 years ago now, and I moderated a panel that you were on with a few other good thinkers. One of them was Konstantin Kisin,
Mhm.
and Konstantin made a real plea in that panel, where he said, "Look, and remember this was 3 years ago, so go back in your mind a bit, pre-Trump, second administration." Um, America and the West is basically subjugating itself and saying, look, we've been responsible for all these terrible things, whether it's colonialism, whether it's patriarchy, whether it's whatever. And gosh, we need to be vilified for that, and we need to somehow pay the world back and all this stuff. He basically said, look, you guys are like Western society better stand up for itself soon, or it's going to lose its position here. And like, yeah, no society is perfect, but show me a better one that's had a more positive influence on the world than Western society. And if we let that get dismantled, and make no mistake, there are parties out there that would love to try to dismantle it, or at least just try to pillage it, right? Take all its prosperity for themselves. Is like you're going to lose it. So you're nodding as I'm saying all this, but I mean, is the West kind of in an existential? Is this sort of somewhat of an existential moment for the West, where we've got to say, yeah, look, we're imperfect, but like we're not that bad, and if we just focus on calling ourselves to our better angels, we can make the future even better. Like let's not toss out the baby with the bathwater here.
You're absolutely right, and Constantine is absolutely right. He was right then. Uh, it's this whole idea that there were so many amazing insights that came with the Enlightenment, and the way that those ideas were deployed, primarily in the American situation, but also through the French Revolution and other developments. But we came up with this system of government that had some extraordinary concepts that had never really been tried out on a grand scale before. One was this idea that the people were in charge of themselves, that they had a right to overthrow their governments if the government was not acting legitimately, like, and even putting that on paper, right?
Mhm.
Um, the way we crafted our understanding of speech, and this is why speech is such a big topic now, is because there is such a profound difference in how we look at speech and how everybody else looks at it. The American version, uh, you know, when James Madison was doing, I think it was the Virginia Declaration of Rights, I think he had to choose between using the language toleration of religion and freedom of religion. And he came up with this idea that if you say toleration, that implies that the government has purview over religion.
Mhm.
If you say freedom of religion, what you're doing is recognizing that something is free. And they ended up with freedom of religion. That became the basis of freedom of speech, which again is this concept that it's not the government is allowing us to speak. It's that we have freedom of speech. It exists. It can't be controlled. It shouldn't be controlled, and the government does not have a legitimate interest in controlling it. Um, that is totally unique. And what's so strange about a lot of the sort of modern progressive thinking is that, yeah, why throw out the baby with the bathwater? Like, yes, let's improve things. Let's make life, let's make it so that there's more opportunity, that there's less inequality, all these things. You can achieve those things without getting rid of freedom of speech or due process or any of those things. So Constantine's exactly right. We have to stand up for the fact that we made something incredible. And well, maybe not we, but they made something incredible. We're the
Yeah.
inheritors of it. We're the stewards of it. And I personally would feel great shame if it were to vanish on our watch, right? Like that would be a failure, such a failure of our generation, and I hope that's not the case.
Well, I hope it doesn't come across as bootlicking, but you are one of the, I mean, people furthest out on the vanguard of this. And you take a lot of slings and arrows for it, but you're out there every day fighting the good fight. So thank you for all your work there.
No, thank you too. No, likewise, I know this is a big subject for you too. So,
Well,
uh,
not the way it is for you. Um, all right. So, uh, so after having been through the Twitter files and seeing how entwined the government got in speech regulation here in the States, I mean, a lot of people, I think, were shocked by that. And they probably have the mindset now that, like, okay, but it got exposed and they're not doing it anymore and we're back to regular free speech. Is that an erroneous assumption, or did the sunshine really work as disinfectant?
um, So I think it would be wrong to think that the threat is past, right? There certainly were a lot of concrete steps that were taken that were really important. Like they actually got rid of the State Department agency that was doing, engaged in, uh, I, I would say censorship type activities
Mhm.
here in the U.S.
Yeah.
The state
Sorry, who were they there? Was that under the old administration or the new one?
well, it was created by the Obama administration.
Yeah.
It's been in existence since then. That they were one of the big characters in the Twitter files, and they've been eliminated. The FBI's the Foreign Influence Task Force. My understanding is that that's no longer functional. So there were a bunch of the Stanford Internet Observatory, which was doing work with the government.
Yeah.
It, a lot of those bureaucracies have been closed, which is why you hear people like Rand Paul talking about, yeah, the anti-speech bureaucracy has been shut down. The thing is, though, there are still there's still an awful lot of money in that sector. There's still a huge collection of NGOs that do this sort of
Yeah.
content flagging work. We still see in the Trump administration there have been plenty of examples where you would worry about how they're thinking about speech. The Europe this week is going to have a message on Christmas Day that's going to feature Jimmy Kimmel. Um, that's ironic, however, because the Europe has certainly gone into overdrive in terms of its speech enforcement in the last 9 months or so.
That was my next question to you. Yeah.
Yeah, and the reason that's significant is because the thing that we saw in the Twitter files, and unfortunately that I didn't really understand until the most of the story was passed, was that there had already been constructed in Europe this enormous, sophisticated government bureaucracy that was designed to monitor and censor speech at a grand scale, right? And the one sticking point was the United States. This was articulated by John Kerry, who actually said this out loud at a WEF conference. You know, he talked about how the First Amendment is a major block to our ability to hammer misinformation out of existence.
Mhm.
And
That pesky First Amendment.
that pesky First Amendment, yeah, exactly. And so we did eventually see there were communications between Europe, the United States, certain agencies within the U.S. government, some NGOs, the military, oddly enough, NATO, and the major theme was trying to get the United States to be folded into this larger system. And I thought that was so terrifying. Like that was the reason, like I was freaking out last year. Uh, I thought that if the Democrats were reelected, that we would certainly be folded into the Digital Services Act regime,
Mhm.
and it would become like a pan-Western system. That possibility is still on the table. I think people have to understand that, like, that's not going away. The speech regulation bureaucracy is becoming more advanced and emboldened in our former Western allies in Europe and in Canada and in New Zealand, Australia, all those places. The United States is different, but it's not out of the woods by any means. This is still a very, very dicey situation.
Okay, so I'm going to go here anyways, even though it's difficult to talk about this in a way that people interpret as partisan.
Mhm.
You know, one of the things I really appreciate about you, Matt, is you just talk about what is and the facts, and you get slammed all the time for people who are reading a partisan angle, one way or the other, into it. And I love how people are, you know, flaming you because they think you're a Trump lover, and of course you wrote the book, The Insane Clown President. And then other people think you're a pinko, which probably shows me you're doing it right because you're getting criticism from both sides. But a lot of what you were uncovering during the Twitter files were things that had been put together, in a previous administration, but were getting put on steroids during the Biden administration because of COVID and all that stuff. That was central control was desired even more to try to protect us from misinformation and whatnot. Now the Trump administration has actively decided to chart a different course, and to your point, has dismantled some of this stuff. Um, Again, not
No,
just
I'm
asking this objectively. What is your interpretation of the current administration's policies as compared to the previous ones on the issues you care about most?
so it's a great question. I think the if you were a pure First Amendment uh, defender and like the old school ACLU, you would find plenty of things in this current administration to be upset about, and you can look at Greg Lukianoff's organization Fire and
Hmm.
see that they filed plenty of, at least one major suit against the Trump administration over their sort of catch and deport policies, right? Uh,
Hmm.
there was a Supreme Court case in the 40s that basically said that once people come to the United States, they're entitled to the same speech protections as citizens. And there's a little bit of a problem because the law is divided here, right? The Bush administration created new immigration laws that basically give the president the right to deport people for speech reasons. But that case is still on the books, so
Hmm.
there's a challenge that needs to be made, like which one is superior. But I would say, like, as an American, I don't want people coming in this country who are even non-citizens and worrying about what they have to say if it's protected legal speech, right? Uh, so I know that there are a lot of people who are Trump supporters who say, well, hey, they're visitors here. They should watch what they're saying. They shouldn't criticize. Um, and I understand the frustration with that, but it's it's an end around to get at the First Amendment. On the other hand, the Trump administration doesn't have like an organized um, bureaucratic idea about completely eliminating the First Amendment or establishing full government control over speech. It seems like when they do get in trouble with the First Amendment, it's incidentally as part of some other program they're pursuing, right? So
Hmm.
they want to deport all of these people who are undocumented. So as a consequence of that, they'll go back and they'll look at editorials they've written or something along those lines. Technically, that is a First Amendment violation. Same thing with, Trump wants to make a point about the Gulf of America, so he tosses AP out of his office. That
Right.
is technically a First Amendment violation. It isn't one that exercises me terribly. But, uh, I just there are serious issues. I just think people have to remember to put it side by side with what you're looking at in Europe, which is you have this Digital Services Act, which is overtly a censorship law, um, and it's sort of pan continental and uh, gives the government almost limitless power to police speech, and that's just that's just the European laws. Like most of the individual countries have even stronger laws where you're seeing people regularly jailed for memes and things like this.
Right.
And some of them are friends of mine, including Americans. Like I have a friend who's a playwright in Germany who just got arrested again for a book cover. So we don't have that here. Like that's even though we have some issues with speech, and Trump,
Yeah.
I wouldn't say Trump is like a First Amendment theorist or anything like that, but it's not the sort of diabolical let's find a really clever way to undermine the First Amendment type of thing. That was what we saw in the Twitter files.
Okay. So higher level question. We talked earlier about, the risk of Western civilization kind of, getting dismantled, and it's time to, we said, step up for Western society. Um, do you feel, do you have an opinion? Is if we were heading one direction under the previous administration, are we heading more towards the right direction now with all of its imperfections, or no?
Uh, I mean, the one reason that I, I'm a little bit more tolerant of what, tolerance is the wrong word. Uh, the, Donald Trump at least was legally elected, right? So
Hmm.
what you are seeing are, for instance, the policies that are so controversial about the deportation policies and closing the border and all of those things. People did vote for that at least, right? Uh, what I worry about is a situation where you have a minority of basically unaccountable, faceless bureaucrats who are imposing, um, a series of ideas that we don't even that aren't even visible to us. Uh, that scares me a lot more than a highly aggressive, um, you know, set of policies by an administration that feels like it has enemies within the country's bureaucracy. There's no question that there's some dangerous stuff going on with the Trump administration. I think they have certainly a tendency to color outside the lines, but uh, I worry more about the just sort of mass bureaucratization of government, and the elimination of this idea of a balance of power completely, because I do think that that's the competing idea here, and what Europe is heading toward, uh, and it scares me. Although, not to say that there aren't scary things here too, but I just think the
Yeah.
other thing scares me more.
Yeah. There's so many threads I'd love to pull on here, but we're getting near the end of the hour here. Let me ask you this, Matt. So if if the American people said, you know what, Matt, we really think you get a great vision for how this country should be. We're going to give you a blank sheet of paper. What reforms would you most like to see the U.S. implement? What are some of the ones that would be on that list?
God, that's such a tough one.
It could be anywhere. It can be around free speech. It could be media. It can be civil liberty. It can be economic.
Uh, I don't know. I mean, I think a lot of my concerns right now are in the area of, um, education, speech. Um, I don't know. I'd have to sit down and think about it. I mean, like,
Okay. So
I,
it sounds
I
like education reform would be a big one on there.
education reform would be a big one. You know, I think there has to be something probably involving the Fed,
Okay.
and some kind of way of addressing what you talked about previously, the sort of casino-like nature of the economy. I've been sort of out of that game for a while, but in terms of what I've been covering for the last 5 or 6 years, um, that's just like a firefighting issue. Like it is not even one where I can even think about big philosophical solutions. It's just like desperately trying to prevent something real bad from happening. So I don't know. I'd have to sit down and think of it. Most of the time, journalists, we're not in the solutions business. We're in the identifying problems business. So
Right, right.
if you're asking me to think that means things are have already gotten to a pretty serious place. So but I certainly. You know, what I would say is I would say that the thing that we were discussing before is the thing that gives me the biggest pause as like a father too, and is like the lack of um, a metaphysical grounding for people growing up, like you know, some kind of unifying culture or belief system. It just seems to be absent, and I don't think a society can live for very long without something to believe in. And,
Yeah.
that's a big task, right? I don't know. I don't even know how to address that, but that needs to be dealt with somehow.
All right. So since you mentioned that, I've had some deep discussions on this channel recently about value systems, whether that's religion, whether it's community organizations, things like that, right? And it's essentially what Western society is, right? It's a series of values, and then everything else hangs off of those values here, right? So to your question, like how do we how do we clarify what values we as a society elevate, and then how do we expose our populace to them, especially younger people as they grow in this world. So let me ask you this idea, and I'm not asking you to love it or hate it. I'm just curious to get your general reaction. What do you think about like a national service? So, say you're 18 and you get to give a year or two, and it could be anything. It's not just military service. You could be doing public works, you could be working in the education system, you could be working in the healthcare system, building bridges, whatever, right? What do you think?
I'm very in favor of that. I don't know anybody uh, who has been through that who hasn't had a positive experience with that.
Hmm.
That's like I had a friend who is Swiss, who I think was briefly in the Papal Guard or was going to be, but at the very least had to do like a year in the military. Most of the Russian friends that I had, they had to deal with some kind of service. So it was amazing, in the 90s you would meet beautiful women in clubs who could put an AK-47 together
Yeah.
in 3 seconds.
I
Um,
spent a summer in Israel and met a lot of those women. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But no, I think it's an important thing. Like it builds community, it builds this idea of having an investment in the society,
Yeah.
and it also helps, create, give some grounding to people at an age when they need to learn how to break away from being home all the time. So yeah, I'm very in favor of that. I think that would be a great thing, like maybe Peace Corps meets a draft type of thing. I don't know. I don't know what it would be, but I think that is a good idea.
Okay, great. Yeah, it's related to the tar pit I got trapped in on X yesterday, but it is
Oh,
something
really?
that could
Somebody
continually.
was against that?
Yeah, I mean, there's all sorts of things. Well, I tied it to something else, which I don't want to mention here because I don't want the comment section to rat hole. But like you, I think that there's a lot of good that can come from it, particularly societally, and not only the skill learning, right? Rather than just kids continuing to just potentially get trapped on their phones and whatever, right? You're actually learning some practical skills, but also you're out there in the world meeting people from other parts of the country, right? And so you're importantly, I mean, when there's social benefits from that, but more importantly, you realize, hey, people from different walks of life and me, people who have different beliefs than I do, different religions. I'm liberal, they're conservative, whatever. They're all still real people, right? I
Mhm.
mean, there's something about really tightening the social fabric that you'd get from that. So, yeah, I'm a fan of it. People can definitely, especially after yesterday, they can definitely debate how they would might want that implemented. But like you, I think that would be a good thing to explore. All right, so you and your team at Racket are, like I said, you're some of the last and best real investigative journalists out there. Are there any big projects that you guys are working on right now that you can you can share?
Well, we're in the middle of trying to do something, but I think the news business is in crisis at the moment. It's been in crisis for a while, as I think people are aware of. But the kind of news that existed when my father was joining it in the late 60s and early 70s, when you know, nobody knew what a reporter's political views were. The idea of reporting was just getting the facts together and then letting the audience sort that out.
Right.
Um, that's gone, and nobody knows whom to trust anymore. So we are trying to think of. I'm trying to find a way to, hire some more people and structure some beats and sort of reinstill that type of journalism again. The problem is that the way the business is organized right now, it rewards kind of the strong voice as opposed to just information. So, but probably going to move more in that direction of just like a straight news that has no point of view. I think I'm trying to figure out a way to do that. Let's put it
Well,
that way.
the world definitely needs it, and I think there are enough people out there, and I think a lot of them are watching this video right now, who are craving that and will pay to support those models. So,
Hope so.
if and as you have new things you're trying to release that, require a little bit of funding or a little bit of public support, please feel free to ask this audience.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much. We'll see what comes out of it. But yeah, no, I hope I hope we're able to come up with something. So that would
All
be
right.
fun. Yep.
Well, I'll be cheering you on. So, for folks that would like to follow you and your work, Matt, where should they go?
We're on Substack at www.racket.news, and I'm on Twitter at mtaibbi, so at mtaibbi.
All right, great. And Matt, when I edit this, I will put the your URL and your Twitter handle or your X handle up there on the screen, so
Awesome.
folks know where to go. Folks, the links will also be in the description below this video here. Folks, Matt, thank you. This has been a fantastic privilege. Thank you so much. Folks, please join me in expressing your appreciation for Matt by hitting the like button and then hitting the subscribe button below if you haven't already, as well as that little bell right next to it. Yeah, Matt, like I said, thank you so much for coming on, especially making the time during the winter holidays here. Merry Christmas to you and your family. Um, you know, we're both, uh, you know, uh, Boston suburb boys from the old days.
Wait,
Uh,
which Boston suburb are you from?
Marblehead.
Oh, right. Okay. Yes. Yep.
Yeah,
Yep. All
yeah.
right.
And in that fact, on X, I just shared one of my Christmas tree ornaments, which is a little jar of fluff. If you grew up having fluffernutters.
Fluffernutter.
Yeah,
Yeah.
fluffernutters. Yeah,
Excellent. No,
yeah.
thank you, Adam, and hope you feel better. Get over your flu. Uh,
Thanks. Well, this
have a
this
great
is this has been such a pleasant distraction from it, so I'm already feeling better from that. So thank you.
one.
All right, Matt. Well, hopefully we'll see you again on here in 2026, and everybody else. Thanks so much for watching.
The purchasing power of the dollar has lost is fallen 99%. Those are the numbers you're saying. 99%. The dollar went totally fiat. Now, the dollar started declining before then. I mean, bear in mind that until 1934, you had $20.67 to the ounce. And that was from what, 1856 or something. And it was it was de facto, but then it became de jure with the Gold Act in 1900. And I reckon in 2026, you're going to see a combination of a collapsing dollar, higher tariffs, pushing up prices, if you like. That's so much like Germany between 1922 and 1923.
Although the dollar's decline began earlier, it has already lost about 99% of its purchasing power since it was separated from gold. Deutsche Bank has explicitly warned of a crisis of confidence in the US dollar, suggesting that shifts in global capital flows might overwhelm usual currency fundamentals, causing erratic moves. JP Morgan says the dollar's long bull run is ending, with an expected 10 to 20% medium-term decline against the euro and yen. They see this not as a collapse but as a gradual reset. By 2026, increased tariffs and a failing dollar might cause prices to rise, a scenario similar to Germany's inflation crisis in 1922 to 1923. The dollar has lost around 99% of its value, albeit the slide started earlier. The 1900 Gold Act established that $20.67 would purchase 1 ounce of gold until 1934. Now, in mid-2025, JP Morgan warns that U.S. tariffs, trade policy, and slowing growth could lead to stagflation. They lowered their U.S. GDP growth forecasts for 2025 to 1.3%, from 2%, owing to tariff impacts. They also expect foreign demand for treasuries to decline, which weakens one pillar of dollar strength. The International Monetary Fund (IMF) has also flagged that recent U.S. tariffs could add inflationary pressures and warned of weakening domestic demand and slowing job growth. The Roaring Twenties and the 1929 crisis were both exacerbated by Hoover's tariffs and the Fed's credit expansion under Benjamin Strong. Now, the risk is much higher and might destroy the currency due to Trump's tariffs at the height of a huge debt bubble. As we dive into the video, don't forget to hit the bell icon and subscribe so you don't miss any updates.
Well, basically, what you've said it all. I mean, the purchasing power of the dollar has fallen 99%. Those are the numbers you're saying. 99% since the dollar went totally fiat. Now, the dollar started declining before then. I mean, bear in mind that until 1934, you had $20.67 to the ounce, and that was from 1856 or something. And it was, it was de facto, but then it became de jure with the Gold Act in 1900. Basically, when the Fed came along, they screwed everything up because under Benjamin Strong, they expanded credit. I mean, Benjamin Strong was a great believer in stimulating the economy with extra credit. And that led to the Roaring Twenties, which led to the collapse between 1929 and 1932, enhanced, I may say, by not President Trump, President Hoover's tariffs at that time, which was the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act of 1930.
Yep.
And President Trump is doing exactly the same at the top of the debt-cum-credit bubble, which makes 1929 look like a pimple. I mean, this is the big one. It really is. And it'll destroy the currency. I think it's so important. We've got to understand this, and we've got to be prepared for it. Yeah, I mean, basically, no. We used to have a phrase, which I don't hear nowadays, about kicking a can down the road. People, I think, sort of think, whoops, I don't think it's, they start talking about a reset and, all this sort of rubbish. I mean, the fact of the matter is that the Fed has got no control over the situation. And it can't have control over the situation because the situation is politically driven. And until you persuade an electorate, to give up all their welfare this and welfare that, and, all the pressure groups to, that, look, you're out of here, forget it. We're actually going to deal with this one seriously. Until that happens, no. I mean, there is absolutely no solution, Craig. And, I've always said it's crisis first, solution second. I mean, once you have the crisis, then you can start talking about a solution. But is that really going to work? Well, I'd like to think so. But the fact of the matter is that when you get those extreme economic and monetary conditions, like, the credit collapsing in terms of its value, all bets are off. This is what they found in Germany, because what happened in 1920 to 23 led to Hitler, led to the Second World War.
Right.
Hayek actually put this very, very well in his Road to Serfdom. He sort of had a bit where everybody starts saying, we need a strong leader, to get us out of this mess, because they'd had enough of the weak politicians who screwed it up. We need a strong leader. And what did they get? They got Hitler.
Germany experienced 3 stages following World War I. The first, from 1918 to 1920, saw the mark lose roughly 80% of its value, akin to the inflation that followed the COVID-19 pandemic. The second, from 1920 to 1921, saw a brief improvement as the mark strengthened, business resumed, and optimism returned. And the third, From late 1921 to 1923, concerning parallels can be seen in the US today. Officials are publicly pushing the dollar lower, markets have soared, and bond yields are still high. Only short-term T-bills are in demand, as foreign investors are shunning long-term treasuries. The dollar may plummet if bond yields increase while the Fed lowers interest rates. When tariffs are added, we may witness a crumbling dollar and skyrocketing prices by 2026, akin to Germany's hyperinflation. Since exporters benefited, politicians and business groups at the time even favored a weak mark. Similar to this, current policies run the risk of devaluing the dollar's purchasing power even while they may benefit certain groups. Let's dive into the interview.
Yeah, we're not quite there yet. I mean, you mentioning the, Adam Ferguson's book, When Money Dies and all the rest of it, actually hits the nail on the head. Because I put out a note, I think it was a few days ago, which looked very, very carefully at what happened in Germany between 1918, which was the end of the First World War, and 1923. And there were three phases. The first one was between 1918 and 1920, when the purchasing power of the Reichsmark fell about 80%, something like that. So, this was a nasty situation. Now, this is actually quite like what happened following the COVID shutdowns.
Right.
And then we had this inflation, which meant that the purchasing power of the dollar actually fell. Not as much as 80%, admittedly, but it fell quite sharply. And then what happened in Germany from around about February 1920 to December 1921 was suddenly things improved. And the Reichsmark actually went up against the dollar, which, remember, was on a gold standard, and a proper gold standard. You could exchange your dollars for gold at 20.67 to the ounce. So the Reichsmark was strong. Businesses were recovering, if you like, from the shock, the post-war shock. There was a certain amount of tourism going on. I mean, things were really humming. The stock market tripled. Everybody thought, this is absolutely wonderful. We've got over this, etc., etc. But then there was a crash. I think the stock market lost something like 25% in the December of 2021.
1921.
Sorry, between 1921, end of 21, in other words, through 22 and 23, what happened was that the purchasing power of the Reichsmark began to collapse. And the collapse was total. Now, so far, we've had the post-COVID thing, which led to inflation, da-di-da-di-da. And now, guess what? Perhaps the long bond yield has not really declined. It's still held between 4.5% and 5%, and looks, if it goes through 5%, then we will be bricking it. It really will be very serious. But meanwhile, of course, the S&P went up from something like 4,200 in 1922 to where we are now, which is 6,500. This actually looks very, very much like that period in Germany between 1920 and 1921. So what follows? Well,
right. That's the bad news.
This is where we are. So how is it going to happen? That's the question. Well, I can see a number of things. We just had Stephen Mirren appointed to the FOMC. No, he's not quite there, but it's just a question of signing on the dotted line. He will be in the FOMC. He was the Mar-a-Lago guy who wants the dollar down and reckons that he can get everybody to agree to it. Well, good luck to that. They are going to destroy the dollar.
Yeah.
The foreigners so far and large institutions, for some reason, are asleep at the wheel. They don't understand what's happening. There is a deliberate policy to drive the dollar lower. And if you look at the chart of the trade weighted, it is awful. It's about to fall from where it is, which is about 197.5, down to 90, and I doubt it'll stop there. So what's this mean? This means that the purchasing power of the dollar is declining. Now, on top of that, what do the foreigners do? Well, I mean, everybody, including the large institutions, stand back and they don't buy treasury bonds. I mean, certainly with anything mature, in terms of length of maturity, they're not going to touch it. The only thing that will sell is near cash, which is actually what T-bills are. It's almost like cash, printing cash. So that's what's going to happen. Now, you will get a rising level of bond yields just at the moment when the Fed is trying to reduce interest rates. Well, that's going to do. They're going to have to reverse that. Or the dollar tanks. And if the dollar tanks, what does that do to its purchasing power? It begins to collapse. And then, on top of that, we've got tariffs. Now, I know everybody's running around saying, well, tariffs haven't had any effect. But it does take time for this to work through. And I reckon in 2026, you're going to see a combination of a collapsing dollar, higher tariffs pushing up prices, if you like. And, I mean, that's so much like Germany between 1922 and 1923. So the next question is, I mean, we all reckoned that the Germans were muppets and stupid and all the rest of it at that time. But actually, if you read the history, you see, well, it was politics. It was politics. How? Because it lowered their manufacturing costs. You had the inflation king, Hugo Stinnes. You had, and this is a familiar name even today, Fritz Thyssen, steel magnate, etc. I mean, it was wonderful for them. They were making huge money because their costs were based in Reichsmarks, and they were selling it into global markets and getting gold-backed dollars for it.
The warning signs are obvious, and preparation is crucial, regardless of whether the dollar experiences a similar fate. Will authorities intervene before it's too late? Or do you believe the United States is on the verge of a disaster akin to Germany's collapse in the 1920s? Should the dollar really start to depreciate by 2026, how should investors position themselves? If you enjoyed the content, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and press the bell icon for timely updates. We appreciate your support, and thank you.
Now we're just starting another leg, which I think will be at least symmetrical to the prior leg. So we had the move from under 300 to 1900 consolidation. That was a six-fold increase. If you assume we go up six-fold from 2000, that's $12,000 gold. So I kind of, at a minimum, I think that that's where we're headed. But if we end up having a dollar crisis and a U.S. sovereign debt crisis, we can go a lot higher than that. There's a good chance that that's going to happen. You asked me what's driving this. It is the monetary and fiscal policy of the United States, which are disasters. Once silver is above 50, once we're at 51, 52, and 50 becomes the support, I think it's not going to take long for silver to double to 100. I think that move will happen quickly. It may happen in a matter of months.
Gold can rise dramatically, potentially reaching $12,000 if the next leg matches past gains, with even higher levels possible in the event of a U.S. dollar or debt crisis. They attribute the rally to America's poor fiscal and monetary policies. For silver, once it breaks above $50 and holds that as support, they expect a rapid surge toward $100. Peter Schiff, the speaker, is a prominent financial analyst, economist, and CEO of Euro-Pacific Capital. He contends that the Fed's rate cuts in the face of growing inflation are contributing to the increase in gold prices. Mining stocks rose 30 to 40%, indicating that investors are now embracing gold's power. In an effort to lessen their dependency on the US dollar, which would make it more difficult for the US to pay for imports and debt, central banks are purchasing gold. Gold is a useful substitute for fiat money since it can be easily utilized for payments through tokenization or digital systems, thanks to modern technology. Gold is the real money of the free market since it maintains and even increases worth over time, unlike currencies, which depreciate. As we present clips from the video, please like this video, subscribe to our channel, and turn on the notification bell to stay instantly notified every time we upload a new video. Thanks for the support, and enjoy the video.
And I think that's really what's helping to drive the move in gold now and down in the dollar is the Fed is about to start cutting rates into rising inflation. And it's hard to imagine when they've done that before because inflation is above their target and rising, and they're going to cut into that. So it's the opposite of what they should be doing. Even though the economy is weak, inflation is strong, and that should be the primary mandate is to get inflation back down. But they're going to abdicate that role because of the political pressure to try to artificially stimulate the economy, the housing market. So gold is going to take off from here. We basically just left the launch pad, and we got a long way to go. But the whole time that gold was going sideways for 3 or 4 months, gold stocks were quietly going up. Gold stocks went up 30-40% while the price of gold traded sideways. And that's something we haven't seen during the entirety of the bull market because the investors in mining stocks have never believed the rally. They've been skeptical the entire time. They're finally starting to accept the fact that gold's not going to crash. But these gold stocks are not priced for current gold prices, let alone the future gold prices, but at least they're pricing out a crash now. People accept, okay, gold's going to be around this level, so we got to bid up these stocks because they're still really cheap, even though they're up better than 90% on the year. And gold mining stocks are the number one performing sector in the market this year, and they're hardly ever discussed. No one talks about them. Well, I think that is going to happen. I think it's pretty clear. If you look at the main buyers of gold the past couple of years, it's been foreign central banks. Why are they doing that? I think they're preparing to replace their dollars with gold. I think gold is going to become the primary reserve asset for central banks. And that's going to be a game changer for the United States because the world is not going to need our dollars anymore. Well, if they don't need our dollars, then how are we going to buy all the stuff that we need because we don't produce it? And how are we going to finance our debt? Because we've been relying on foreigners to finance that debt because they have the savings that we lack. So it's a big problem for the U.S. But I think from a monetary perspective, you're going to see, I think, people utilizing gold using the technology that exists today, whether it's on-chain with, tokenized versions of gold, or whether it's just through proprietary closed systems where, the custodian has the gold and just uses technology to allocate ownership digitally so that people can transact business, receive and make payments, send money and receive money using gold, right? Just like using PayPal or Venmo or any other, Zelle or any of these things, you can just use gold. You don't have to transfer your gold. If I wanted to buy something from you and you wanted me to pay you, a gram of gold for it, right? Whatever that is, 30, 40 bucks, whatever, right? I don't have to send you a little bit of gold in an envelope and mail it to you. If the gold is held in a custodian and I have it tokenized in my wallet, I can just email or text you the gram. And now the ownership of the gold goes from me to you. So now you own the gold, not me anymore. You've got it. It's in a vault. Now, if you want the gold, you can have them ship it to you. But why do that? Just hold on to the ownership receipt because now if you want to buy something, you can pay with gold because the guy that wants to sell you that, he wants gold too. Why would people prefer gold to dollars? Because gold holds its value. Why would I want dollars when I can have gold? It's like, why use the post office when I can send something by FedEx, right? The free market has provided me with a better alternative than the government, right? Why do people use Uber and Lyft? Because taxis are too expensive. Why are taxis expensive? Because the government provides the licenses and regulates them, and so they're expensive. The free market alternative is, well, I'll just call an Uber, right? So the equivalent of an Uber in the monetary system is gold, right? Gold is the free market's money. Fiat is government money, and it's lousy because it loses its value. The longer you hold it, the less it's worth. The opposite is true of gold. the longer you hold your gold, the more it's worth. So given a choice, which would you hold?
According to Peter Schiff, the $50 mark, which was last attained in 1980 and 2011, is a significant barrier for silver. He anticipates a sharp increase to $100 once it breaks above because shorts will have to cover. This was largely driven by global industrial demand, which, according to the Silver Institute and Metals Focus data, rose by 4% to another record of 680.5 million ounces in 2024. For the time being, he would rather Wall Street remain closed so that his clients can purchase gold and silver equities at a discount. Despite extensive marketing, Bitcoin has underperformed gold for years. He suggests purchasing gold mining equities in addition to actual silver since he believes they are still cheap. He prioritizes selling gold at modest markups over expensive items at his business, Shift Gold. He cautions that it is dangerous to wait for dips because prices are rising and a reversal will probably occur from much higher levels by then. Let's get deep into the interview.
Very realistic. I mean, especially if you have $10,000 gold, $200 silver, what is that, 50 to 1? I mean, so that's very realistic. And I think potentially silver could go higher than that. But right now it's above 41. It does have this psychological, and not just psychological, real resistance at 50, because we have a double top there that goes back to 1980. And then again, we hit it in 2011. So silver has not broken out yet. While gold has, silver is still in this range. So I do expect that it will, there'll be some overhead resistance. But I think once silver is above 50, once we're at 51, 52, and 50 becomes the support, I think it's not going to take long for silver to double to 100. I think that move will happen quickly. It may happen in a matter of months, right? Because once we take out that resistance, there's nothing there. And I think there's also a lot of shorts out there in silver that, are going to be in a lot of trouble trying to cover those shorts and buy silver that really doesn't exist. I actually like the fact that this bull market isn't on anybody's radar, because I just assume Wall Street buy into the market later at much higher prices. They don't need to get in now. I want my clients to get in now. And the less competition, the better. I just want to get as much, gold mining stocks and silver mining stocks as I can. And the last thing I want is, Merrill Lynch and Goldman Sachs telling all their clients to buy, right? Because that's going to make it more expensive for my clients. So the longer they ignore this bull market, the better, as far as I'm concerned. Like, I'm in no hurry. I waited plenty of time for this, and I'm in no hurry to speed it up right now. But I do look at that as a positive sign that nobody's invested. The public, has no idea. You have one group of people that are still fixated on Bitcoin, and they're buying Bitcoin instead of gold. Although Bukele, I just read that he just put $50 million into gold. So maybe he's figuring out that Bitcoin is the wrong way to go. But, it's interesting that Bitcoin is barely up today, and Bitcoin is more than 15% below its peak priced in gold from 2021. So 4 years, Bitcoin's been losing value relative to gold, despite all the marketing hype surrounding Bitcoin, all the ETFs that were established, the NFTs, the Super Bowl ads, the celebrity endorsements, Donald Trump and the strategic Bitcoin reserve and the Bitcoin czar and making Bitcoin the capital of the world, right? All that pump, and they can't even get Bitcoin to go up. So what does that tell you? But what is going up is the one thing that's not getting any hype, and that's gold. And now silver, going up as well, but not into record territory. So these gold stocks, I think, are still extremely cheap. They could double again from here, and I don't think they'd be expensive, especially considering that if the gold stocks double from here, gold's going to be a lot higher. So it's like they still wouldn't have caught up to where they should be. So we got a long way to go in the mining stocks. In fact, in April of this year, I kind of aggravated some of the guys at Shift Gold because I put out this report that said the best way to buy gold, and it was to buy the gold mining stocks. And I was telling my clients for the first time not to buy gold. And gold was around 3,200, 3,300. And I said, look, I'm a gold bull. I love gold, But these gold stocks are so cheap that it doesn't make any sense to buy gold above ground. Just buy it while it's still in the ground because it's so cheap. And while gold went sideways for all those months, the gold stocks were soaring. And they're not as cheap as they were, obviously, but they're still very cheap. And I still think people should be buying gold stocks and gold now, and physical silver and these silver miner stocks. So, Shift Gold is my gold company. What you want to don't do, there's so many, unfortunately, shysters in the gold industry. And they rip off their customers by pushing them into these numismatics or collectible coins, fake numismatics, proof sets, odd weighted, coins you've never heard of. And they do that because the markups are 30, 40, 50% or more. And so you need the price of gold to go up 50% just to break even. So why buy gold at 3,600 if you need 5,000 just to get out even? So at Shift Gold, we're marking up gold like 1%. So if you bought gold yesterday, you could sell it back today and make a profit, right? So you don't want to get ripped off. So going to Shift Gold, you're going to get the best prices. You're going to get just bullion. We're not going to try to push you into something that makes us money. We're going to sell you what you need to make yourself money. My goal is to make a little money on volume, not on ripping people off. But that's also interesting. Like Shift Gold's phones are not ringing off the hook. I mean, it's slow, and that's the same throughout the industry. And what the Shift Gold guys have been telling me, our reps, is that customers have been reluctant to buy because they're worried about buying the high. And I've been telling our customers all year, you got to buy the high because that's all that you're going to have the opportunity to do. The problem is the longer you wait, the higher the high is going to be. So you just might as well buy now. I mean, because you're not going to get a big enough pullback. You'll get some pullbacks, but why wait? It's not going to be enough to make a big difference. And the risk is that by the time you get a pullback, it's pulling back from a price that's much higher than if you just bought it right now. I don't see any panic to buy. Gold's not moving up $100, $200 a day. I mean, that's going to happen. I mean, it moves up $10, $20. I mean, today, $50 is a big move because we got data. But, I haven't seen anything crazy. The gold stocks go up 2%, 3%, maybe 4% in a day. Then they pull back. They're not up 10% in a day. They will be eventually, but we're not there yet. So, people should get on board on the mining, on the metal at Shift Gold. And gold stocks, my gold fund, I'm very partial to my gold fund that's managed by Adrian Day. But I think that the hidden value in my gold fund is our portfolio of very small junior miners that would be almost impossible to buy today, given the liquidity. But these stocks haven't moved the way the big ones have because the money that has been flowing in has been buying the Newmonts and the Barracks and the Agnico Eagles and the Franco-Nevadas and Kinross and I Am Gold. I mean, they're not buying the little ones.
Peter Schiff's outlook underscores that gold and silver remain deeply undervalued in the current environment. With central banks diversifying away from the dollar, inflation eroding purchasing power, and precious metals poised for technical breakouts, he believes now is the time to accumulate gold, silver, and mining stocks before Wall Street and the broader public catch on. Do you think silver will finally break its decades-old $50 ceiling in this cycle? Will gold's rise to potential new highs force central banks to accelerate their shift away from the US dollar? Share your thoughts on Peter Schiff's analysis in the comments section below. If you find this video informative, please consider supporting us and turning on notifications to stay updated about our latest videos. See you in the following video. Thanks for watching.
The U.S. government has moved to impose tariffs on deliverable gold bars, reversing previous expectations that bullion imports would remain exempt under President Trump's reciprocal tariff structure. A July 31st CBP, that's the tariff organization, letter reclassified the bars as, quote, semi-manufactured. making them subject to duties under code 7108.13.5500. This decision sparked a surge in New York gold futures, where December contracts traded over $125 above London spot before easing back into what you see there. Switzerland, the largest exporter of kilobars to the U.S., faces heightened trade pressures following a 39% country-specific tariff.
The U.S. Customs and Border Protection ruled that 1 kilogram and 100-ounce gold bars from Switzerland fall under a tariff-bearing category, overturning prior expectations of exemption. This threatens Switzerland's position as a central refining hub and could disrupt global bullion markets, making them subject to tariffs ranging from 10% to 39%. This move disrupted the international gold market, with the London-New York price spread surging to over $100 per ounce compared to the usual 30 cents. A major gold refinery in Switzerland halted deliveries to the U.S. following the CBP ruling. The change could fragment the global gold market, prompting buyers to shift toward non-Swiss bars at premiums. It also puts pressure on CME Group to address delivery issues for futures contracts. If upheld, the tariffs may reshape gold trade flows and force costly supply chain adjustments. Renowned market analyst Vince Lanci is known for his perceptive analysis of trading in commodities and precious metals. He discloses that certain huge gold bars, 1 kilogram and 100 ounces, are currently subject to tariffs from the United States. These bars are frequently used in EFP transactions as well as wholesale bullion trade. UBS is cautioning that the increased costs of these U.S. taxes on massive gold bars may lead to a mass closeout of short exchange for physical positions, which could cause disruptions in the funding markets. The unwinding of these trades, which are typically settled in London, may complicate funding circumstances because it would create an unexpected demand for cash and liquidity in the city's bullion market. The apparent decision by the U.S. Customs and Border Protection Agency, announced privately in a letter to a Swiss refiner on July 31st and made public on Friday, sent gold futures in New York soaring to a record, as insiders warned that the tariffs would have dire consequences for the market. Then, just as quickly, prices tumbled after the Trump administration suggested imports of gold bars wouldn't face tariffs after all. In the 12 months to June, Swiss exports of gold to the U.S. were worth approximately $61.5 billion. Switzerland's rate is among the highest in the world, after Brazil, Syria, Laos, and Myanmar. According to reports, gold bars were in such high demand in the U.S. in May following Trump's announcement of sweeping reciprocal tariffs the previous month that Costco capped the number of gold bars that could be purchased in a day. Let's jump into the video for more details. If you like what you see, please give us a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel to stay updated on our latest content.
Refiners in Asia have also paused shipments as uncertainty spreads. Industry experts warned the move could destabilize the gold futures market's pricing function, with UBS and BNP Paribas strategists questioning whether the ruling was an error or a fundamental policy change. To put a little bit of color on the mechanics of what is going on and why this is affecting the market the way it has, before giving you a very simple big picture overview. London deals mainly in 400-ounce bars. U.S. contracts are for 1 kilogram or 100-ounce bars. During COVID, the problem that's happening right now also arose. When there is demand for U.S. delivery, London bars are sent to Switzerland to be re-refined or refabricated into U.S. formats. London has been the default physical hub for gold for decades, while the U.S. has focused on making a more robust futures market. Dealers in London are typically long metal in their vaults in London and hedge by being short U.S. futures through the EFP carry trade. They are long London gold, 400-ounce bars, and short U.S. gold, 100-ounce bars. If U.S. delivery is called, which historically is rare because the COMEX is a paper market, and everybody knows that you should want to get your metal from London, they would take the metal that they have, their 400-ounce bar, send it to Switzerland where the refineries are, have the Swiss break down the 400-ounce bar into 4 100-ounce bars, changing the format, satisfying U.S. rules. The new tariffs disrupt that trade. A London trader, long gold and short U.S. gold, long London gold and short U.S. gold, now faces a choice. First of all, London traders have been doing this for years. They're long the physical and they sell futures against it legitimately to carry the differential. It's kind of like lending money out. Gold is money. And they get comfortable doing that. And it gets to be a crowded trade. It gets to be a lopsided trade. And so they have these large legacy positions that they're always massaging. But when news like this comes out, and you can't take your 400-ounce bar and put it into 4 100-ounce bars to ship it to New York, if someone ever wants the physical, you have a problem. You can find another refiner, not possible overnight. I wouldn't give you any. Squeeze the shit out of you, excuse me. You could do nothing and die a painful death, or you can buy back the U.S. contract quickly. So they're short the U.S. and they're long London. So they buy the U.S. contract quickly, and then they decide whether or not to sell the London contract. So it's a regulatory contract issue. If somebody in the U.S. were to say, "I want the gold," as we have been doing, well, then you would have to get the gold. The driving behind the price higher is this covering or this unwinding of the EFP, which is really just a spread between London and New York. This exposes the weak link in the triangle of trade. London acts as an intermediary, but problems in metals markets over the last 5 years, gold, silver, and nickel, for example, and copper, have been venue or fungibility problems. Again, very similar to what happened during COVID. Supply chains that are too long are being shortened. Now, to zoom out on a little bit of a big picture thing here, because this is all part and parcel of what's been going on over the last 3 years.
Vince points out that the conventional relationships between the US and London gold markets have been upset by this sudden action. There was a notable pricing disparity, as New York futures reached all-time highs, while London spot prices remained essentially unchanged. For example, London spot prices closed at $3,439.10 per ounce, while December gold futures hit $3,534.20 per ounce. The White House announced that it would issue an executive order to clarify its tariff position in response to market turbulence. The goal of this action is to clarify any confusion and establish stability in the bullion market. The current state of affairs underscores the intricate relationship between international commodity markets and trade policies. As the U.S. administration seeks to assert its stance on gold imports, the broader implications for the gold market and its participants remain to be seen. The White House's upcoming executive order should hopefully clear things up, said the logistics source. Protecting the U.S. gold futures during this uncertainty are high stocks of gold in COMEX-owned warehouses after massive inflows over December-March as traders hedged against the possibility of broad U.S. tariffs hitting bullion imports. The COMEX inventories currently amount to 86% of open interest, against a more normal 40 to 45%. So there is no liquidity issue at present, said StoneX analyst Rona.
Copper earlier, London spot prices were largely unaffected and are now lower. This reflects the weakest link in the triangular gold trade between London and the United States, as I just said. Moving on to the immediate potential effects. If the move is intentional, it is a game of chicken with the potential to disrupt the gold market at the financial side substantially. The negotiation is with Switzerland, but it highlights that Western gold's trade weak point is physical supply in London, while Western demand is increasingly in the US, pulling the gold over here. The supply chain must shorten. Because gold is also money, restricting its movement is weaponizing our payment chain. If unresolved quickly, this will push market participants into their own corners, taking their kickballs and going home, but more aggressively, make global trade more fragmented and bilateral, with every deal negotiated separately. If Trump meant to do this, he could still adjust course, as he recently did with copper, depending on the reaction. The Swiss have already offered, as we said, at least verbally, to consider moving refining capacity to the US. It is unclear how serious that is. If it was unintentional and the result of a classification error, or Trump just bluffing to see how they'd react, the decision could be reversed within days. For now, given the opportunity, this is effectively a coin flip. Traders might use this as a point to close positions, winning or losing, until there is clarity. The implications are significant, but the core story is here. Related posts. By the way, that full story is in Tariff Shock Triggers Historic Gold Market Location. The link is there. Related post. Last night we put it out. U.S. imposes tariffs on Swiss gold bars. Yesterday we also put out UBS raises the 2025 demand roof. Suspicious, no? Founder special, Fed death, gold industry coming to America, as we thought would happen. Swiss offer U.S. its gold industry and trade talks, and the must-watch report from yesterday. Okay. We have a little note here we just want to say. Isn't it interesting? I won't say the word suspicious, that within days of each other, the Fed weighs in on gold revaluation. The LBMA is exposed as a weak link while we're trying to repatriate our own gold supply industry. These things point to potential revaluation of gold. They definitely point to a deepening and a realization of the importance of gold in global trade going forward. They show the LBMA problems, and we need to secure our payment and supply chains for gold if we view it as an international asset that's needed. Other metals would follow. In 5 minutes, he could reverse this and say, I didn't mean it. And you could think that he's either screwed up or bluffed. And you'd say he's a dummy. Or, and this is equally true, Trump has a habit of, most government does, but Trump has a habit of shooting and then aiming. So perhaps he shot and aimed because he wanted to see how they can react. You know, when you're the incumbent, you get to make those mistakes. That's why Microsoft software sucks, because they can put it out and then fix it later on. Anyway.
This steep tariff on Swiss gold bars marks a significant escalation in U.S. trade policy, potentially reshaping global gold flows and driving up domestic prices. With high demand already evident, as seen in Costco's purchase limits, the new levy could further tighten supply and increase costs for American buyers. How might these tariffs impact gold prices in the U.S. over the next year? Could this lead to increased smuggling or alternative sourcing of gold? Drop your thoughts in the comments section below. If you find this video informative, don't forget to support our channel and turn on notifications to stay informed about our latest videos. See you in the following video.